Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Today we look at a gang of 13 people who have been jailed for more than 50 years for importing cocaine into the Cotswolds. Undercover officers from Gloucestershire Police watched the ringleaders of the gang for 6 months to build the case, which has now seen 13 people behind bars for their involvement in a Stroud-based drugs conspiracy. The lead detective says the drug dealers had created an atmosphere of intimidation and fear as they brought a shocking amount of drugs into the area. The group appeared at Bristol Crown Court on Friday the 23rd of April and received a combined sentence of 52 years. The investigation saw serious and organised crime unit officers conduct covert inquiries which allowed them to gather evidence against the offenders and prove their involvement in supplying more than 3 kilograms of Class A drugs. The conspiracy was led by 36-year-old Andrew Venner and 32-year-old Lee Fisher, who coordinated the gang. Surveillance showed the pair met on a number of occasions during the summer of 2018 and also had regular conversations via text and phone calls. In August 2018, police followed the pair to the McDonald's car park at Cribbs Causeway, where they say a significant meeting occurred. Officers observed them walking around the car park for half an hour before leaving. Police say they were arranging for drugs to be sent from Gloucester to Dursley. Mr. Venner had an additional 6 months added to his previous sentence after being found guilty of conspiracy to supply cocaine. Mr. Fisher was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months after pleading to 2 counts of conspiracy to supply cocaine. Matthew Cornwall, 36, worked in conjunction with Mr. Venner and Mr. Fisher to coordinate the supply of drugs with Albanian couriers from London and then distributed them to local drug dealers. Telephony work showed Mr. Cornwall coordinated with Mr. Venner before liaising with couriers for the local level suppliers. Mr. Cornwall had an additional 6 months added to his previous sentence after being found guilty of conspiracy to supply cocaine. Father and daughter duo 50-year-old Stephen West and 29-year-old Diane Strosewska came next in the conspiracy following their involvement in organising and distributing to Lee Fisher's supply chain. In June 2018, a warrant and significant arrest was made at their home address in Acacia Drive in Dursley. The property was found to be a base used by Lee Fisher to coordinate the supply of cocaine. The majority of this money was heavily contaminated with drugs. A mobile phone seized from the pair showed evidence that they were in active supply of cocaine. Mr. West was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months after pleading guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to supply cocaine, and Mrs. Strosewska received the same sentence after being found guilty of conspiracy to supply cocaine. Mother and son, Tracy and Andrew Holdsworth, aged 56 and 36 respectively, were significant to the organisation and distribution of Lee Fisher's supply chain. They worked in a management function for supplying to dealers and also lived at the Acacia Drive property. They acted as the custodians of money made from supplying and supported Mr. Fisher in obtaining more drugs to sell. Andrew was sentenced to 5 years and 9 months and Tracy was sentenced to 4 years after both were found guilty of conspiracy to supply cocaine. Danny Fisher, 35, brother of Lee Fisher, played a significant role in distributing to dealers. On regular occasions, he acted on instructions from his brother before liaison with Stephen West and Diane Strosewska in overseeing the money the group were owed from drug users. In July 2018, surveillance officers who were hiding in a tree to go unseen captured a meeting between Danny Fisher, Stephen West and Diane Strosewska. Danny Fisher was arrested having left the property with a bag containing money, drugs and drug debt lists showing who owed how much money and how many ounces of cocaine. Danny Fisher also communicated to his brother Lee, who provided instructions from drug rehab in Luton. At least 2 previously used 1 kilogram wrappings were found by the side of the shed at the address. Several drug lists were recovered from the address showing others involved in the drug supply. Danny Fisher was sentenced to 5 years after pleading guilty to conspiracy to supply cocaine. Rise Pewley, 28, and Yasmin Anya Marie Lean, 48, worked with Stephen West and Lee Fisher to obtain quantities of drugs which were distributed to users across the county. Miss Lean had strong links with Lee Fisher, the Holdsworths, Stephen West and Diane Strosewska. Recovered messages showed she had a large customer base and offered assistance to others. Miss Lean was sentenced to 5 years while Mr. Pooley was sentenced to 6 years. They both pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply cocaine and possession with intent to supply cocaine. Jamie Griffey, 28, Zach Hurley, 23, and Stephen Pace, 29, also worked alongside Mr. Lean in dealing to Lee Fisher's supply chain in the Stroud and Dursley areas. Between the 18th of July and the 26th of October 2018, 6 key events took place and were organised between Rice Bewley and Matthew Cornwall, and involved Matthew Cornwall meeting Stephen Pace and Zach Hurley. Mr. Griffey was sentenced to 4 years, Mr. Hurley was sentenced to 3 years, and Mr. Pace was sentenced to 21 months, suspended for 2 years after pleading to conspiracy to supply cocaine. Chief Inspector Ian Fletcher told ITV News the amount of drugs coming into the small town was shocking, adding, "It's driven by demand, and it's for the people to understand and recognise drug dealers are making significant quantities of money out of drug dealing. But they are also causing absolute chaos in people's communities and in people's lives. Drug dealers can live a glamorous lifestyle, but they also live with that continuous fear the police will catch them." He added, "Drug dealers, they create an atmosphere of fear and intimidation in their local community. People don't necessarily want to speak about them, or if they do want to speak about them, they don't want to go on record. They don't want to stand in a witness box and give evidence against these people. It's those scenarios where more traditional policing methods have failed. That's where surveillance steps in, and we will look to develop and understand the crimes that are being committed by those people." Chief Inspector Ian Fletcher said he hopes the sentencing will show people involved in drug dealing they are not untouchable or above the law. He said, "We are extremely pleased with the court result, but our work will not stop there. Our commitment to our communities mean that we will do our very best to bring the most serious offenders to justice." So what are your thoughts about this Gloucestershire gang who received a combined total of over 50 plus years in jail for their involvement in distributing Class A drugs around the Cotswolds? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.